I let them move into my house during COVID. 3 years later, I was sleeping in the laundry room while my son-in-law turned my bedroom into his office. When I asked for my own space back, he said, "You're too old to care where you sleep." My daughter said nothing. That night, I went into the basement and found the box I swore I'd never open again. I'm 67. I've lived alone in my house in Springfield, Missouri since my husband Ron passed away in 2008. It's a modest 3-bedroom place, nothing fancy, but it was ours. After he died, I kept the house up on my own. I paid the taxes, did the yard work, replaced the roof in 2015, even fixed a leak under the sink once. I'm not rich, but I've always been careful. I worked as a school secretary for 30 years. Retired early. I was doing okay. Then COVID hit. In April 2020, my daughter Mallory called. She was crying. She and her husband Nate were both out of work. He did IT support for a private company in Austin, and she was doing graphic design contract work from home. They had a 2-year-old, Ellie, and a second baby due in a few months. "Mom," she said, "we can't make rent. We don't know what to do." I didn't even think. I told them, "Come stay here. You'll be safe." They drove up that week. I set up the guest room for them. Put the crib in my sewing room. Cooked a big dinner. I was just relieved they'd be close. I was scared too, and I thought, if we're together, we'll get through it. At first, it worked. I gave them space. I watched Ellie when they had online job interviews. I made dinner almost every night. I didn't complain. But as the months went on, things started shifting. Nate started acting like the man of the house. Like my house was his. He didn't ask before making changes. He moved furniture. Threw out things I'd had for years. One day, I came home from the grocery store, and my couch was sitting out by the curb. My couch. One I bought with Ron in 1993. It looked old, Nate said. I figured it was time. I wanted to scream. I didn't. I looked at Mallory. She just gave me this little smile, like, it's not a big deal. That was the beginning. Next came the kitchen. Nate needed better flow for his cooking. He started pulling cabinets off the wall. I told him no, not without my say. He said I was being stuck in my ways. Again, Mallory just nodded along. I still paid every bill. They gave me maybe $100 a month, and even that stopped after the first year. When I hinted about them finding a place, Mallory said, "The world's still upside down, Mom. We're not ready." Then came the worst part. Nate wanted to start doing remote work again. He said he needed a professional background for Zoom meetings. He asked if he could use my bedroom during the day. I said fine, just don't touch my things. A week later, I came home from picking up groceries and my bed was gone. Gone. My clothes were stacked in baskets by the washer. My lamp was sitting on top of the dryer. I found my mattress shoved against the back wall of the laundry room. My pillow was on top of a pile of towels. I couldn't believe it. I went upstairs and found Nate sitting at a big desk in the middle of my bedroom, headset on, talking to someone on Zoom. When I confronted him later, he barely looked up from his laptop. "Jean, you're retired. You don't really need a full room." I turned to Mallory. She stared at the floor. Didn't say a word. That was it. That's when it all changed for me. I slept in the laundry room for 6 months. No window. No door. I had to fold my blankets every morning so they could use the machines. Nobody cared. I'd hint. I'd ask. Could we switch back? Maybe I can have my room again? Mallory would just say, it's temporary. Nate's work is just intense right now. Intense? I gave birth to her, raised her, paid for college when her dad died. I gave them a home when they had nowhere else to go. And now I was sleeping beside a damn water heater while they had the run of the house. I started spending more time in the basement, where they didn't go. Just to breathe. And one night, after they all went to bed, I found myself digging around behind the furnace. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe just something that still felt like mine. That's when I saw it. A heavy brown box. Old, taped shut. I hadn't touched it in years. It had Ron's handwriting on top. I froze. It was that box. I promised myself I'd never open it after he died. It hurt too much. It was where he kept his journals, some of our old financial stuff, and a letter he left me right before he passed. He was sick, but didn't tell me everything. That letter was the last real thing he gave me. I sat on the basement floor and opened it. Inside, I found everything. The letter. Some photos. And then, an old brokerage statement. From an account I thought had closed. I remembered we had a small investment fund, but I assumed it was empty after Ron got sick. I called the company the next day. There was over $150,000 in it. All in my name. Ron never touched it. He wanted me to have it if things ever got really bad. Well, things were bad. I felt numb. I sat there for hours thinking. That's when I realized I didn't have to live like this. I didn't have to beg for respect in my own house. I didn't have to keep pretending this was okay. I started making quiet moves. I contacted a lawyer. I updated the deed. I got in touch with a real estate agent I trusted. I asked about my rights. Turns out, they had none. They weren't tenants. There was no lease. Legally, I could put their stuff on the curb if I wanted. But I didn't do anything rash. I waited. Watched. Planned. Then, last month, they said they were taking the kids to Kansas City for the weekend to visit Nate's sister. I smiled and told them I'd feed the cat and water the plants. As soon as they pulled out of the driveway, I opened the basement door and started moving. I wasn't done with them yet. Not even close. I had 48 hours before they got back. I moved fast. First, I called the locksmith. A man named Joe. He came that afternoon and changed every lock on the house. Front door, back door, garage. I told him not to leave a single key under the mat. Then I called the moving company. Told them I needed one room cleared, Nate's office, aka my bedroom. They came in, packed every bit of it, the giant desk, the monitor, the rolling chair, even the stupid foam panels Nate had nailed to my walls. I had them haul it all into the garage. I left a note taped to the monitor, "This was never yours." After that, I went to Walmart, bought a cheap bed frame and mattress, and set it back up in my room. I found my old comforter stuffed in the basement and washed it. Put it back where it belonged. My lamp, my books, my framed wedding photo. That night, I slept in my bed for the first time in almost a year. It felt strange. Like the house had taken a deep breath. The next day, I cleaned everything. The bathrooms, the fridge, the floors. I cleared out the playroom. Took down the learning corner they had made in my sewing space. I packed up toys, books, baby clothes. Put them in boxes in the garage next to Nate's stuff. Then I sat down and wrote a letter. It took me 3 drafts to get it right. Mallory and Nate, this is my house. You were guests here. But you forgot that. You disrespected me. You took advantage. Nate, you turned my bedroom into your office without permission. You moved me into a laundry room like I didn't matter. Mallory, you let him. You stood there and said nothing. I gave you a safe home when you needed it. I never asked for anything in return. And still, you made me feel like a burden. You will not live here anymore. You have until the end of next weekend to come pick up your belongings. The locks are changed. You will not be staying another night in this house. Mom, I taped it to the fridge. Then I turned off the lights and waited. They came back Sunday night. It was around 6:15. I watched from the living room window as Nate tried his key. It didn't work. He tried the garage. Also locked. I watched his face shift from confused to angry in 10 seconds flat. Mallory called my cell. I didn't answer. Then she banged on the door. "Mom? What's going on? Let us in." I opened the door. "Just a crack." "I'm not letting you in," I said. Nate pushed forward, tried to muscle the door open, but I had the chain latch in place. "You what?" he said. "You changed the locks? Are you kidding me right now?" "I'm not kidding. Read the note." Mallory looked like she might cry. "Mom, what are you doing? We have the kids with us. You should have thought about that before you turned my house into yours. You said we could stay, I didn't say you could take over." That's when Nate lost it. "This is insane," he yelled. "You're seriously kicking your own daughter and grandkids out? What kind of mother does that?" I stared at him through the crack in the door. The kind that got tired of being treated like a doormat. Then I shut the door. Locked it. Didn't say another word. They stood out there for 20 minutes. Mallory sobbed. Nate yelled. The kids were confused. I watched it all through the curtains. Eventually, they left. They came back the next day with a sheriff's deputy. Didn't matter. I had the deed. I had legal proof. The deputy was polite, but told them there was nothing he could do. They had no lease. No rights. He gave them the same message I had: you have a week to get your stuff. That's it. Mallory looked me in the eye then. Her face was red, streaked with tears. Is this really what you want? I didn't blink. It's what you made necessary. She turned away. They picked up their things that Friday. Didn't say goodbye. I didn't go outside. But I wasn't done yet. Because 2 days later, I made one more call. To CPS. I had a lot to say about the way my grandchildren had been living. The woman on the other end of the CPS line sounded calm. Too calm. I told her everything. How Ellie, now 5, had been waking me up in the middle of the night crying because Nate yelled too loud. How the baby, Sam, had bruises on his arms more than once. How Mallory barely seemed to notice. How I did all the cooking, most of the cleaning, and looked after those kids like they were mine because their parents were too tired or too busy or too annoyed. I didn't lie. I didn't need to. I just told the truth. I told her about the day Nate slammed a door so hard it cracked the drywall because Sam spilled juice on his keyboard. How Mallory screamed at Ellie once for asking for a second snack. How sometimes, when they thought I wasn't listening, they'd argue so viciously I had to turn up the TV just to drown it out. And how, through all of it, no one ever came to check on those kids. Because they were staying in Grandma's house, and from the outside, it looked safe. She asked questions. I answered. 2 days later, a social worker knocked on my door. She was polite, maybe mid-30s, carried a worn leather folder and a soft voice. She said they'd made a surprise visit to the extended stay motel where Mallory and Nate had landed. She didn't share details, said it was private, but her face said enough. Then she asked if I would consider being a temporary guardian for Ellie and Sam. I didn't hesitate. I said yes. The very next morning, I was back at that motel with a deputy and a social worker at my side. Nate didn't say a word. Just glared at me, jaw clenched. Mallory cried, holding Ellie tight like she finally understood what she was about to lose. The social worker knelt in front of the kids. Talked softly. Asked Ellie if she wanted to go with Grandma. Ellie nodded so fast it made me ache. They packed a few things. Diapers. Pajamas. 2 stuffed animals. That was it. Mallory tried to speak, but the social worker cut her off. Said she could petition for visitation once a family plan was in place. When we walked out of that motel, Ellie holding one hand and Sam on my hip, I felt the kind of pain that burns hot and cold at the same time. This wasn't the revenge I planned. It was worse. I never wanted to take her children. But they needed more than I ever realized. Back home, I tucked them into real beds. I gave them baths. I made grilled cheese. Ellie asked if Nate was going to yell again. No, sweetheart, I told her. He's not here anymore. That night, when the house was quiet, I sat on the couch and stared at the door. I thought about Ron. I thought about the letter he wrote me. The one where he said, "You're stronger than you think, Jean. Don't let anyone forget who you are." I'd let Mallory forget. I'd let myself forget. But not anymore. The next twist came 1 week later. Mallory showed up at my house, alone. No call. No warning. She looked hollow. Pale. Like someone who hadn't slept. I didn't open the door right away. She didn't knock. Just stood there. When I finally stepped outside, she started talking fast. "Mom, I made a mistake. I let him take over everything. I didn't protect you. I didn't protect my kids. I didn't know how to stop it. I stayed quiet." She rubbed her face with her hands. "I miss them. I miss you. I'm not asking to move back. I'm just asking to fix what I broke." Her voice cracked. I don't know where else to start. I stared at her for a long time. She looked nothing like the girl I raised. But maybe, under all that mess, part of her was still in there. I didn't say yes. But I didn't slam the door either. Instead, I said, "Prove it." Then I turned around and went inside. Mallory didn't show up again for 3 weeks. No calls. No texts. No drive-bys. Nothing. Part of me thought she'd given up. But then, one morning, I got a manila envelope in the mail. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in ink. Inside was a typed letter, no greeting, no "Dear Mom." Just facts. She left Nate. Said she'd moved in with a coworker she used to know in Austin. Was sleeping on their couch. Said she had enrolled in a parenting class through the state, started therapy, and filed for legal custody of the kids. Attached were copies of receipts, sign-in logs, appointment slips. At the bottom, "I can't undo what I let happen. But I can start acting like their mother." I sat there at the kitchen table for a long time. My coffee went cold. My hand shook a little. I wasn't sure if it was relief or anger. Maybe both. I gave the letter to the CPS caseworker. She nodded, said, "It's a start." Meanwhile, Nate started fighting dirty. He filed an emergency motion, trying to get custody himself. Claimed I manipulated Mallory, that I stole the kids. That I'd been planning it for years. His lawyer sent me a letter calling me unstable. But here's what Nate didn't know, I had footage. From a baby monitor I never took down in the sewing room turned playroom. It had been recording on a cloud service the entire time. I hadn't even remembered it until I saw a blinking light one night. Hours and hours of audio. Screaming. Slamming. Nate yelling words at Mallory and the kids I won't even repeat. I turned it over to the court. So did CPS. And the judge? He didn't just deny Nate custody. He barred him from contacting the kids altogether. Temporary restraining order. Pending a full investigation. That was the beginning of the end for him. It got worse. Turns out Nate had taken out a PPP loan during COVID, under a fake business name. Over $30,000. Spent it on tech gear and crypto. IRS caught wind. Then his former employer sued him for breach of contract. Some shady side work he wasn't supposed to do. He was dropped by his clients. Word spread fast in those circles. By the end of the year, Nate was broke, blacklisted, and facing a federal investigation. Mallory, on the other hand, kept her head down. She kept going to classes. She showed up for supervised visits. She read bedtime stories to the kids over video chat. Every time she did, Ellie would light up. Sam would try to climb into the screen. 8 months passed. The court gave her shared custody with strict conditions. No contact with Nate. Full compliance with the state's parenting plan. She agreed to all of it. The day she came to pick up the kids to move into her new apartment, she brought flowers. And she said something I didn't expect. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm going to earn it anyway." I didn't cry. Not then. But after they left, after I cleaned up the juice cups and packed away the toys, I sat on the edge of my bed and sobbed. For the first time in 3 years, the house was quiet again. Peaceful. And this time, it was my peace. I used the money Ron left me to fix up the house. Not to sell it, but to make it mine again. I turned the old playroom back into a sewing room. Painted the walls. Got a brand new couch. Picked it out myself. Mallory and I talk every Sunday now. No fake smiles. Just truth. The kids stay with me 1 weekend a month. They call it their grandma camp. We bake. We watch old movies. Ellie sleeps in the guest room. Sam sleeps in a little race car bed I found at a yard sale. And Nate? Last I heard, he moved back to Chicago with his brother. No job. No car. No custody. I didn't ruin him. He did that to himself. All I did was stop letting him ruin me. And Ron, God, I hope you're somewhere watching all this. Because I finally opened that box. And I finally remembered who I am. Not just a mother. Not just a grandmother. But a woman who refuses to be erased. Not by a man. Not even by her own daughter. Not ever again.